And my name is Taupuri Tangaro, and I'm speaking to you from my office here at Hawaii Community College, where I serve as a professor of Hawaiian Studies, but also having the grand honor of working with the protocols, Hawaiian protocols and Hawaiian culture in academia as a way of strengthening student success, indigenizing campuses, and really contributing to the University of Hawaii becoming an indigenous serving institution so that indigenous people from around the world will know that, there are institutions that do not require that they leave their lifestyles behind, but actually institutions that have evolved themselves to actually incorporate the values of a community into the academic process. So this is where we are. This is the Mōkaulele. Mōkaulele, one day I'll tell you about Mōkaulele. You know how it is that we give a short name, but a long story behind that name. And if you learn that story, you'll get to understand why. Mōkaulele is a simple platform. It's a just talk story. We use the artists. We could use that. We could focus food people. Farmers and fishermen, fisherwomen. All kinds of. We could look at architecture. We could go through any door, but I like art. So because art is a great intersection where the left and the right brain has a conversation, and also in academia. Sometimes the art is underdeveloped. You take a class in art, but not necessarily the values of art and the process of art is incorporated in how universities work or how we work as university students. So we will, this evening, Mōkaulele focuses on art. And we call together some of our artists to come in share their story, and not just share their story and their art, but I will have an opportunity of looking at their story, pulling out elements that will help highlight some of those, the very principles that will help our students remember that, academia is a journey, like the journey of an artist. It requires innovation, discipline. It requires the ability to see the value in imperfections. So it's a great metaphor, or it's a great framework to look at academic success. So this evening, I have the honor. She's like Spider-Woman. She shows up in her screen and then she goes disappear. Her name is Kēhaulani Kekua, and I first came to learn of Kēhaulani, I don't know, maybe in the 90s, when there was just this rising, that the Lahui Hawaii had another layer of awakening. And in that awakening, the ritualists of Hawaii got together and created rituals to help guide the indigenous awakening. And Kēhaulani's kumu and my kumu just so happened paddled the same canoe. And so Kehau and I, ritual canoe, so Kehau and I found ourselves in a number of ceremonies, backstages in the hula drama theaters, and we began our friendship there, our relationship there. We have one thing in common. We're great on the stage. Backstage, we're just nervous wrecks. You see, Shino can keep still. She's still going back and forth, moving. Okay. But let me introduce you to Kehau. Kehau, aloha, what is this? Ahi ahi. Aloha, ahi ahi. She's on Kauai. I'm in Hilo, Hawaii. So, Kehau, can you tell us your name and, just give us something about you? Who you? You like unmute first. Because I'm not going to read lip yet. Yeah.
Reading lips. Aloha mai kākou. I am Kēhaulani Kekua, and I am born and raised on the island of Kauai, where I am zooming in from. I'm at my studio. It's called Studio Ha'a, and we're right on the outskirts of Kapa'a Town on the east side of Kauai. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, of course. So you're gonna be sharing your story as well as your art, and but I wanna enter that. So I wanna put that story in a framework. Is she the only one frozen, or am I frozen? Oh, she's not frozen anymore.
I think you were frozen too.
Okay, because
we're unfrozen.
Okay, we defrost. But our pule, first of all, our pule to your island. The bug are getting, the mountains are moving in this rain. Yeah, so.
Hano kaua loku.
Kaua loku, yeah, and the lepo helele'i, all of that is beautiful, but just make sure people staying safe. So firstly, our aloha to our sister island up north. Kehau, so today, and I don't want to give titles, and I rarely ever use the word master and stuff like that because I don't think it's necessary. But what I will say, what I do know, you're a kumuhula, you have a community, you're an artist, however you design artists, however you define what an artist is, you have to be, an artist is also innovative, which is not always easy in a very strict culture. So we got to figure out how you negotiate that one. But also you're a ritualist, meaning we have been trained to mitigate the worlds between the physical and the spiritual, the human and the gods, which is not always easy. So what happened in your childhood? Can you share with us your childhood? What happened in your formative years that contributed to this Kehau we know today?
So, I'm going to back up a little bit because I didn't forget. I guess I was just a little bit nervous. And so I was reminded that the best way to get into the mode is to do as we were raised and trained. So mahalo nui for having me here. I'm so humbled. And I was a little bit shocked and surprised that I wasn't second anymore and that I was first. So this will help me ease my nerves a little bit. Vai ke kai nupo loa kulai ke kai o hilo o hilo mai hilo ia hui i mai nei I pa ia mai nei e tamala nai vai nei e ke kiu vai lehu e pane vai ola I ke kai mi o ai kalai e o no ai tauan o mai e anu kui ko hiki ana mai e aloha mai e aloha nui e ia kai kaponi ano ai wale ke kipa ana mai e aloha
No, anei hilo I taine te veu o tulu tulua. O hilo aina ho lulule wana le wa matano o da o mai da wa tilifune o tana ele. Uye te ala o te meile o pana e vai a tu no maina vei mo ai lu kohelu lu koena i te plau ai wana I hei te lea pu ki o na manu. Olo no wai vei o la maame te vei le po I ho kahine wai lo a pai ke kula o hana kahi. A kahi kamana o te aloha ino ho alo wai ai ai motu o e o lai na tini e o haupu te umeila I luna o te upu o te aloha noho ana I te one o lihu e a o he mea e li ai o te aloha. O te aloha vale no ano ai he ahi ano ai ai aloha.
Aloha. Okay.
Back and forth,
Okay.
chanting and chanting. Oh, putting these people, you guys gotta, that's how we gotta make.
Here's some pa'akai for us. Pa'akai kako from Hana Pepe. Okay, so your question was, what was my childhood like?
Yeah.
So I'm the hiapo. I'm the firstborn in my family. My mother is the youngest of 3 offspring. She had 2 older brothers. My grandmother still is, Helen Ka'ipuai Kekua Wayo. And my grandfather is Edgar Miki Wayo. And I'm born and raised here on Kauai, raised on the homestead in Anahola. And my grandmother was a kumuhula. And as the hiapo, I was given to her, to my grandparents, but really to her, to be raised in the traditions of Hanai for the purpose of being raised and groomed in hula. And there was never, a talk, sit down, have a family meeting. There was none of that. It just always was.
Okay, there just seems to be a little frozen. Hello.
Wilfred Wayo.
Okay. There's some freezing that's happening. Noel, can you just let people know in the chat that there's some freezing, that it's all okay? Okay, how are you still there? I don't know what her weather is like. So, you just, number one, you still there? Okay, how are you swimming? Those of you that are coming on board, aloha and welcome. We're waiting for Kehau to return, but if you don't understand, if you don't know the system of Hanai, it's an amazing system, and it's still continuing today, where typically the eldest child is given back to the grandparents to be raised by a generation up. And it's an intriguing system because it places this child in between 2 generations. They're and which is sometimes a little hard to navigate. And oftentimes a lot of responsibilities put in that Hanai system. And, okay, how story may have been so sacred.
Stop.
There you stand. There you stand. Girl, you guys get electricity over there?
We do, actually. We do.
Okay.
And through all of this, I never lost electricity, so it's all good.
Okay. So you were frozen for a while.
For a little bit. Am I back?
Okay. You are back.
Okay,
and
good.
Where you left off was that your family in the Hanai system, there was no lecture, no discussion. It just is.
Yeah. And so my grandfather is the hiapo of of his ohana, which actually comes from Ho'okena on your island, on Hawaii Island. And so Henry Wilfred Wayo was a Hawaiian music composer. And I think the further back we go in generations, they were probably, composing mele in the form of chants. Yeah. So I've always been around it, and it's more precious to me now than I can recall when I was a child. But I was always around music and hula and, all the older haumana making things. And I was just very fortunate to be around that. Okay, so I think my earliest exposure to formal training was just being in the halau and learning to be observative. And my grandmother was a pretty strict kumuhula. And so I couldn't just run around the halau. Now I let kids run around the halau. But those are my first lessons. And as soon as I could show her that I could sit still and not be fidgety and distracting, then she gave me the opportunity to go in the back of the last row, and I could just follow along. But I had sharpened my observation skills. So by the time I was given that opportunity to stand up, I had already begun to memorize a good amount of the hula and the choreography. So those are really precious memories for me, growing up and always being around one facet or another in hula.
Yeah. So, growing up in that family, as you described, is many of us can still relate to that. We're not that urbanized,
we're not.
And even in urban situations, you'd be surprised that some of these family systems continue even strong till today.
Yes.
And the idea that you're born into a system, you're born into a culture, you're born into a particular conduct, a particular attitude, and you're rewarded by meeting that attitude, and you're not rewarded, you're punished or corrected when that attitude gets questioned, and
that's right.
Our world oftentimes is not always clear until you make the wrong thing, and then everybody's there to remind you you're in step wrong, and then they make songs and hulas about how you're in step wrong. But Kehau, at what point, so that that what we call the beginning formative years, we call that a hua, the beginning, the conception. Yes. That formative years. Now we're in the ha'alele, the point where you begin to expand, you step into your own journey, and that's not always an easy thing, because when we came to Hawaii in our ancient days, we had to share canoe. So yes. We're more comfortable and equipped to doing things as a community, but there are times like Hi'iaka where she has to take a smaller canoe and she has to go on her journey. So when did you begin to think independently outside of, and let's look at arts. When did you begin to start thinking, what if I do this? If I do hula, but what if hula is now interpreted in stuff like this? Yeah,
right.
Some of your work. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so that's a great question, because I was just reflecting on that not that long ago, actually. And I asked myself that question: when did I begin to do artsy kind of things? Well, as a young keiki, I grew up in my grandmother's home. Her halau was in the back of the house. My grandfather had built I guess what was supposed to have been a large enclosed garage with 2 bedrooms and a bathroom and a shower. And that's where she taught hula. We never parked the cars in there or anything. It was dedicated specifically for her to teach hula. But in the back of her yard, in fact, throughout her entire yard, were all sorts of varieties of plumerias. I think that there were more than 50 to 75 different varieties of plumerias. She had a beautiful trellis tunnel for blue jade that my grandfather had planted for her on the side of the property behind the croton hedge. there was a ginger patch. The ginger patch is still there. My grandmother passed away back in 1985. My sister lives there. And that ginger patch is still there. Pakalana and Lokelani and all kinds of flowers. So my first art form was making leis. And that was also my pastime. I can recall climbing the trees and just spending hours gathering flowers and making lei. And none of my lei ever went to waste. I remember even at a young age wanting to perfect my lei so that my grandmother would want to wear it when they performed and entertained at the original Kauai Surf Hotel. And so that was my first art forms. And I loved it. I still love to gather. I still love to make lei. I think now more than ever, I've made that deeper connection because of hula. And I've always loved to draw. I always would be doodling. I'd always be sketching. I was so thrilled when I don't know what it was, a sculpture, I guess I had created in the elementary school when I was in the 4th grade, got accepted to be exhibited at the museum. And that was such a big deal for me. But it really wasn't until I went to Kamehameha that I began to explore different mediums and different art forms. And I absolutely loved it. So I left Kauai at the early age, going into the 7th grade. And I insisted I did not want to go to school here in Kauai. I wanted to go to Kamehameha. And so when I was accepted, I started boarding from the 7th grade all the way to when I graduated. But I think it was, and I know that sewing wasn't my thing because in the home economics class, our first this is so funny, embarrassingly funny. Our first assignment was we had to make an apron, and I was so excited. I was so excited to learn how to sew an apron, and I failed big time. I don't know what happened to the apron, but I knew that sewing was never going to be my thing. So, but when I went up to the high school, I filled the time. At first, I thought it would be a good, good way to cruise and offset the more harder classes that I needed to take. And so I started to enroll in different art classes. And that's where I first learned how to silkscreen. I'd be drawing all of these things, and Kauka de Silva actually was my art teacher. And he just kind of took me under his wing and showed me how to do other things. And that was my introduction to textile arts. And I was hooked. Okay. I actually, not really proud to tell this story, but it is part of my journey. I got into a lot of trouble one year. I think I was a sophomore. And my dorm advisor made a deal with me because she saw that I was silkscreening, I was designing these things, I was printing all this fabric, and she said, "My God, that's beautiful." She said, "Okay, you know what? I'll make a deal with you. I will sew the curtains, but you will print. You can come up with a design and print curtains for every single one of the dorm rooms." So Kapi'olani Nui dorm is 2 floors, 2 wings. I loved it. And but that was my introduction to textile arts.
So it's so great. So to revisit the hua, the formative years. Hi'iaka's one was in that crater, began in the bosom of her sister, and it informed her entire life. Yeah, that hua is an important piece. With you, it was within the bosom of your maternal, is it maternal or paternal grandparents?
Yes.
Yeah.
My maternal
grandparents. Yes. And then that your world in Anahola was full of all these flowers, and then there you are. So, yes, hula, but now you're focusing on particular things in your garden, truly your garden. And that's all your hua. Yeah. Then your ha'alele, you literally leave island. You go to another island, you separate, and you really, now you begin to investigate And then you begin to interpret your formative years, the art, through the mediums that were exposed to you.
Oh,
So
we're
that would be
frozen again.
yeah. Now, yeah, Smoke, I'm frozen, but can she hear me?
Yeah, they have a tech.
Okay.
Okay,
yeah,
we're back.
yeah, we're back. So you literally, you leave your formative years, and now you begin to transform or transfer your elements of your years into this arena, this vehicle, this art. And you get into trouble. You probably was smoking like some of the kids in the dorms. And then
I was just being
that's why you had to make curtains, close the windows. But then there was a challenge that was given you. And that's a beautiful thing, because, you know, the person could have just made you exit, but the person saw that there were other things. Now we begin this area we call the huakai, your journey. You know, what, now if we're just looking at this, you know, we're focusing the lens not in the big hula ritual, but just going down to just this, because in this is your grandmother and your grandfather, the halal, the garden, your teacher, the curtains. You know, this is a whole lot more than just a scarf. Can you share with us, which is very valuable, what were some of your highlights, your aha moments? You're like, yes, this is what I was born to do. And then what were some of those dark times when you began to question, really, do I have a place in this? Really, am I stepping too far left? Am I going to get punished for this? Because, you know, in hula, yeah, it's a continuous conversation with the ancient people.
Yeah.
And we cannot leave that conversation, because then hula just becomes a choreography.
That's right.
So can you share with us some of your highlights and your advancements, and maybe some of those times when you just was very doubtful?
Does it show that it's frozen on your end, Kate?
Remind me to buy you one kind one machine or something that you can put gas and pool for reliable electricity. I think you're going out on your island.
I know it's not on this end. I don't know. Is it?
No, maybe it's ours.
Yeah.
But please share with us your highlights.
No worries. No worries. We're just having this discussion, right? So I do want to add, though, when I was in school, so as a keiki, of course, I was raised in hula by my grandmother. She remained my primary teacher throughout my entire life, and I still consult with her regularly now that she's in the Ao Makua all the time. But she insisted that I have other teachers. She insisted that I be exposed to other teachers. So before I went to Kamehameha, still as a young preteen, she sent me to Uncle Joseph Kamoha'i Kēhaulani. He was a very dear friend of hers and one of her closest colleagues. And so she sent me to train with him. And then years later, I went to Kamehameha. And it was there at Kamehameha that I met my third kumuhula, Lena Alakalamahaini, with whom I spent many, many years, learning, being inspired, being groomed and trained by her. But while I was at Kamehameha, I was exposed to the mo'olelo and the epic of Hi'iaka from a different perspective. I grew up being exposed, being taught the chants, being taught the hula. It was always there. But when I went to Kamehameha, and by golly, is it going to be 40 years? I can't even count, but that doesn't matter. But I took a literature class, and the first text that we studied was Macbeth. And then the second book that we studied was the Mo'olelo Pele and Hi'iaka. And so from more of an intellectual, scholarly approach, I was able to study the Mo'olelo And I think that's when I really started to fall in love with all the intricacies and the details. And at that time, I thought that was the biggest deal in my life. Only to find out when I grew older that there were other volumes that had more details that would rock my world and continue to rock my world today. So inspired by it. And along the way, and week in and week out, as recent as I would say a couple of days ago, I'm in a position where I'm questioning myself, you know, should I be doing this? You know, it's difficult. A year ago, when the pandemic hit, of course, everybody got shut down. I chose to not stop teaching hula. We just hula went totally virtual. And my reason for that is I felt that we needed to stay engaged. We needed to continue to do all of the things that we do every week in halau, all of the pule, all of the ritual, all of the protocols, the physical engagement of the dance and all the things that we do in the chants. I just felt that we needed that healing component. And it has been rather challenging. A couple of weeks ago, actually, I had the chance to gather with some dear friends. We were all co-workers, and this is in another part of my life. More than 35 years ago, we all worked in the hotel industry. I was a manager in the hotel industry. It was my life for about 18 years. And even after Iniki hit, I continued, on that journey. But I realized that this group of friends who I love so dearly don't even know this side of me. They don't know this side of me because at that point, more than 35 years ago, I still had hula. I still did my art, but that was something that I did for myself. Everything else was invested and focused on climbing that corporate ladder, becoming an executive manager, doing all of the things that people do in that, in that world. And so that was my life for about 18 years. And so when we gathered, I realized that these dear friends of mine don't know that I'm an artist, and we haven't seen each other for many, many years. So that was a really stark reality check for me. And I left the hotel industry, oh God, I think about 1997, in the late 90s, which is when I met you. And I was introduced to that world of connecting and engaging in formal protocols, to stand up for protection of the land in that last big movement before the Mauna back in the late 90s, Mōkaulele, standing firm for the protection of access for Native gathering rights. And it was huge for us, but that's when I met you. And that's when I met everyone else. And that was a different segment of my life that we began to look at things even more closely. And so I've been on this journey with Hi'iaka. I continue to be so inspired. I make sure that it is a fundamental part of the training and learning experiences for my students. And my entire art journey, or my journey as an art.
Let's give her some time to defrost. So if I'm to recap this section called the Huaka'i, You know, okay, so if I'm to recap this until Kēhaulani comes back on, um, she said some important things that we can use in this world when we're trying to strengthen the student's journey here in academia. And one of them is, are you there? One of
so I think he's gonna try and bring me back because it's frozen.
You there? Where is she? I see Wu. So Kehao, are you there?
I'm back.
You're back.
I am.
Oh, there you are.
Yes.
So Kehao, when we're looking at some of the things that, so what you're doing, you're sharing that piece of your life. And I want to pull elements on that because sometimes our students, when they become students, they have this ideal. You start college, you pay your tuition and you graduate. And they don't realize that there's life that happens. And there's layers of reality that unfolds. Beautifully, you said you grew up with Pele in your family. Then you went Oahu, you introduced Pele through the book. And then in the 90s, you Pele as a foundation for the awakening of the Lahui and the preservation of nature. So same Pele, but you've matured along with her. And that piece is hugely important with our learners. That one, knowledge is meant to evolve, and knowledge and maturity, they go parallel. So as we mature, Pele matures with us. Isn't that a beautiful
Yes.
thing? The other thing that you did say was that your friends, you know,
Yes.
who you were 30 years ago is the same you, but
Yes.
again, there's the you is, I like these Maoris, they like to pluralize the you. They say used, you know, used. You's gonna come to the party or something, you know, all of you. We don't use that in English here, but it's really the plural that we don't realize how plural we are. And so as we mature, people will begin to see different sides of us, but also we get to see different sides of ourselves. And the more exposure we enter into, the more we grow these plurality of really, who am I? Because in my kids, they laugh because when somebody calls me John John, they already know it's my Kahalu'u Oahu rural village name. And when they call me Kaipo, they already know that that's my you know, my youth, my but when they call me Tangaro, they already know that, you know,
Yes.
there's a maturity, and it's like this Hi'iaka that matures in her journey. And I think one of the issues that we have in living in a modern world like this is we try to go into the preservation. You know, we want to preserve a moment. We put so much emphasis on, you know, moisturizing, and you don't want to lose that youth. And when you can't, when it's going, you gotta, you know, you gotta cosmetically do something. You know, we put so much value on the pickling that sometimes we're afraid to evolve. We're afraid to learn. And mistakes, we're getting so intolerant of mistakes, our own, as well as those in our community, our spouses. We seem to punish them for life if they make a mistake. Some of those actions perhaps requires that, but you know, sometimes just basic trippings, fallings. Now, I am, you know, I'm reading this, and I've read it before, but when you first gave this to me, it was a couple of years ago in 2014. I believe you gave me this piece here, but now years removed, I'm reading this again, and I'm something else is sticking out. And so we know Yahuwah, your growing up years, and then your Ha'alele, you went to Kamehameha, and how you pulled some of those values in, and then you started to create your own stroke, your own steering. And then you started this journey, you know, and that introduced you to the many layers of who Kehau is, like the many Puamelia, the many plumerias, you know, and then your community is like, they don't know this part of you, and isn't that odd sometimes? Like, oh yeah, I didn't know it either. You know, you just grow. But now there's a whole ina. It's like so. This is according to our myth formulation. You start somewhere. You ha'alele that place, and then you start your journey. And you go through the ups and downs of that journey, the rites of passage. You reach a certain point. You accomplish your task. And then you make your way back to your village, your starting point. You end up base one, but you come back very differently. So I want to know, who is this Kehau today? Who is Kehau in 2021? And what does this mean when you say created without any patterns, stencils, or guides? The illusion of imperfection is truly a reflection of the beautiful energy and inspiration that flows from the spontaneous dance of the artist's hands. So even your art, you're still dancing.
Absolutely.
That's not
Absolutely.
You're tutu, but you've taken that same physical movement, and that's what you're doing. Brilliant.
Yes.
So who is Kehau today because of this journey? And can you please speak to us about the role imperfection has in perfection? And as we're waiting for Kehau to defrost, those of you who are sitting here, please, you know, she's telling her story, but it's a mirror really to your own story. So if her story is triggering up, you know, some of your memories or some of questions that you may have, some clarity, you know, we'd love to, you know, begin to put it in the chat. After Kehau discusses Ho'ina, I want to ask you to start sharing some of her artwork. We want to see how her life is represented now in these silk scarves.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. Hi, Kehau.
Hi.
So
Okay.
who is Kehau today and
So,
world of imperfection?
You know, when I was not just dabbling in silkscreen, I was like really into designing and printing fabric, but I was doing that kind of more as a hobby. I would do some craft fairs and, you know, big community events, but in the early 80s, my focus was really being, you know, climbing up that corporate ladder in the hotel industry. So I still did that. It was a big part of my life, but I did that for me. And I always was fascinated with silk. And I tried my hand at it. There was no formal instruction available. Of course, there was no such thing as YouTube videos or anything like that, and nobody was teaching it. And, you know, so I ordered in some supplies and I tried my hand at it and I completely failed. It was just really, really difficult. And so I just kind of put that on the side and thought, you know, I'll just pick up another hobby. Well, fast forward many years later, I think around probably 2009 or 2010, around there, I thought I'd try again. And so I started to do research. I didn't take a formal class, but it was really through trial and error that I began to learn more about painting silk. And I loved it. I loved the flow and the feel of it. But it was very unforgiving in a sense that, you know, if you don't have a barrier that's set up using a resist, like borderlines in your design, then that dye is just going to spread across the silk. And it's quite lovely, actually, can blend colors. And I really, really love that. And so I began to fine tune and experiment with different kinds of dyes, mixing my own dyes. There's basically two ways in which you can
Aloha kako. We're waiting for her to defrost. She thinks it's me.
Okay. I'm getting good at this. Okay, just unmute that. Okay, so we're back. So there, you can paint silk with dyes, which is what I do, or you can paint with fabric paint. The thing about when you do art on silk using fabric paint, it basically just goes on the surface. When you work with dyes, it goes into the fibers, the very fine fibers. And so there are dyes that you can use that you can just iron, you know, to set. The colors aren't that vibrant. And so the dyes that I particularly like to use require a process of steaming. So what the steam does, and so the process is every one of my pieces start out with a blank canvas of silk. Hey, Kate, can you pass me one of those blank on the chair if they're hanging? I'm just gonna grab a piece of silk. Underneath that. Yeah. Yeah, so all of my pieces start plain white and different one, a different kind. So, and there's different kinds of silk. This, you see, it's kind of sheer. This is a silk chiffon, which actually is, for me, it's one of the harder silks to work with because it's so thin. It's so thin. However, the one that I'm wearing, this is silk chiffon. Okay. And then there's different kinds of silk. There's like hobble tie silk, this crepe de chine, which I really, really love. And this here is, sorry, it's all wrinkled. Oh, this one's better. It's not wrinkled. Yeah, because you know when you're a hula person, Tangaro, you cannot have wrinkles, right? Okay, so this is silk charmeuse, which I really, really love. It is a thicker gauge silk. It has a really smooth hand on the surface, and the quality of it is just much more finer than other silks like silk chiffon and hobble. Large frames. They're actually standing up, and you know, my studio is kind of small, so if I have halau, I have to like put all my stuff on the side. So I fold up my screens, and I had a friend of mine, I drew it out. I said, this is what I want. It needs to be very mobile so I can make use of my space in the studio. And so when I need to clear the floor, because we're gonna dance hula or whatever, I fold up the screens and I just pop it up against the wall. So they all start off as a plain white canvas of silk. It has to be pre-washed because it's a natural fiber, and you know, they're made out of silkworms, and silkworms give off this gummy sort of substance which can block the fine layers of fiber in the silk. So you wash it, and then after that I can work with it. So what I do is I stretch the silk on a large frame. I use these little pins to stretch the silk. And then I begin the hand painting process. So here's the thing with me. I'm not, and it doesn't really have to do with patience. When I paint silk, I just go with the flow, literally. So I never ever create stencils. I never use guides. Everything is freehand on the frame, on the silk. So every piece that I create is original, and I can reduplicate it. using the same motifs and the same dye colors, but it's still an original. So the process is pretty long.
You spoke to not using stencils, just going with the flow. Now let's go back 40 years when you were that CEO of that hotel, and the tourist industry. How did you use stencils back then? Did you have a precedent and you had to work within that precedent, or were you always a free flow kind of a person? And the reason why I ask that is oftentimes many of us are free flow, but we're given birth into a system where it's cookie cutter. You got to act a certain way. There's absolutely no inner development. And some of our talents actually get subjugated. They get abolished, sometimes unintentionally by people in our families, because that's our formative years. And then how does one create a life when those primary traits are no longer enrolled? So that was my question with Kehau. I sort of suspect in my brain that there was always a free flow element of you, but did that free flow exist in your corporate world?
No, it was very structured.
See?
And I like structure because I learned structure in Halau.
Yeah.
So Halau is very structured, and I love that. I love strict teachers. I'm very passionate about having that kind of, not necessarily parameters, but that strict influence of having standards and procedures and processes and expectations.
Right.
So when I work with silk, it's a little different. It's kind of like a free fall thing for me. I can do what I want to do. And every time I come to the frame, I stretch a blank canvas of silk. I already have some kind of preconceived notion or vision or idea in my head. And so the first thing that I do is I begin to hand paint a base design using water-based, non-toxic water-based resist. And so once I start putting down that design, immediately it begins to merge into something else. And I used to find myself a little disappointed when I was like, no, that's not what I wanted to do. But it's so much trouble, it really is, just to set up and get started. So I got used to, well, then maybe I'm just the conduit. I'm the artist, but I invite that energy in. When I paint silk, it's very meditative for me. It's my mantra. It's a meditation. I practice my chants when I'm at my frame. I think about, like other things that we do in hula. So all of that energy kind of flows in and around, the environment that I'm working in. And, very, very rarely am I disappointed with the unknown outcome, with the final result. Sometimes I just step back and go, wow, I know I didn't do that alone.
So in this world of academia, and I'm looking at, the stretching, the first thing, different, they're silk, but they're different kinds of silk. And then you stretch them all and I like the idea of being stretched. Yeah. You just put them in a framework and stretch. And that's why I love hula, because hula is a culture of flow, but there is a particular parameter in which we flow and we can't exhaust it. And because hula is generational, we're dealing with ancestors and descendants, people never even come yet. So there's this huge universe within the framework of hula. But when we look at your frame, and what you just discussed is sometimes what we need to bring into as a consideration when we're looking at professional development in the university system. You can have the framework, but each student coming in will stretch differently. They'll take different kinds of pigments. Sometimes you have a curriculum and it's a design curriculum, but as soon as it hits real life, the student, it flows in different directions. Some of our faculty go nuts. They just cannot handle that, you know, especially if you're in the sciences, because, you know, it's a little bit more rigid, but it's human.
Yes.
I think that's one of the reasons why sometimes our indigenous communities take a little longer in academia, because they're trying to make sense of where's the spirit, where's the flow. You know, everything is so preordained, and we love preordained. But interestingly, you can put two people in a hula school, same age, can be even siblings, ate the same food. They learn the same hula from the same person, but the bodies, by design of their bodies, the hulas will be different.
That's right.
And so, you know, how does this metaphor of your screen work? And that, see, that's the thing, is we're looking at your work as a metaphor, because one of the things I refuse to do is subscribe to leadership principles from the East Coast. I said, no. I have this Kanaka woman up Kauai. She stretches like we do our students, and I'm sure she can teach us something. I have this tattoo artist on Oahu. You know, he has and we can learn from that. So we need different ways of looking. And this is also like parenting. I'm looking at this, all of you in this gallery view, and I saw one with a mo'opuna coming in, mo'opuna coming out. This, when we look at it, not just as, oh, she's creating a silk scarf that I can wear, but really in this silk scarf is a journey of life, a rites of passage is encoded one, and makes us ask our question, what is our formative years like, and what of our formative years are we using today? What was the point in which we began to explore different journeys, how we're going to expand our formative years, and sometimes stepping into the areas that our ancestors didn't step into yet, but somebody got to go in that side of the ocean. What was the journey like? You know, Hi'iaka never went up. She never did journey alone. Her first time she journeyed was really what was a biggie. She didn't have any little cute journeys. What was the journey like? How were you able to look at the perfect moments and also the imperfect moments? Because for me, it's the imperfect moments that is the huge teacher for me, and I hold it fondly.
Yes.
And some of my high school teacher or my university teachers, you know, only if I was mature at that time, because some of them I still cannot stand their face when I think of them, because they just give me a horrible time. But you see, I didn't have the grooming to say that person was actually the one that got you to succeed. That failure in that semester was your success. It got you to tap into a desperation that you never knew you had resources to address, and you've come forward because of it. Now, as a result, you're all this to your community, so you're a whole lot more. You're exactly as your grandparents wished, but you've added layers and layers to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, that you're sitting in this gallery, we've shared Kēhaulani's story, and you know, you cannot tell a story without us thinking, well, how is that? And sometimes things come out of their mouth. You go, how did she know that's so much me? We share, and silk. I like, Kēhau, you know, you knew I like silk, girl. I had enough of,
Who doesn't? Who doesn't like silk?
You know, us hula people, muslin is like the national hula material. I mean about silk. But in any case, this is the time for you people in the gallery. Do you have any questions related to Kēhau's, and you know, this is not the only time, I hope this is not the only time you get to know Kēhau. You know, text her, go to her website, continue to learn. She has some resources there that give you greater insight. But the next time, if you have an opportunity to pick up a scarf, you have to know it's not the physical. This is just a vehicle of a person's journey. You're wearing a person's journey. Isn't that a beautiful thing? She could have kept this all to herself, but she's sharing her journey in all its imperfect forms. Everyone unique. She's sharing it with you. So the question is, what is your scarf? What has your life's journey brought you? What because of your life, your formative years, your challenges, the teacher that decided to make reason to keep you in school instead of kicking you out. How is that playing in your overall well-being? So if you have any questions, can we you know, and then of course it's 5:01. So if some of you have to already go because you're looking hungry, go. But if you can stay for a little while, 10, 15 minutes, you know, if you have questions, you know, ask us your questions. And no, hey, Mauni.
Or you can just bring the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, right now there's no questions.
Oh, no questions. Okay.
Okay, so do any of you have any questions, you know, directly related to her art, her story? You know, the thing is, if you ask a question that's a little off-colored, she'll tell you, oh, I don't like answer that. But it's well ask the question, because again, she was not just sharing her story, she was probably reflecting a number of our own stories. So that's the thing. When our grandparents die, sometimes we don't have the person to tell our stories to. Some of us, I can look at this, some of us are reared by our grandparents. And you know what happens when you jump generation? You become very polished in communicating, being a medium between the old generation and the new generation, the dead people and the living people, the hard and the soft, you know, qualities of life. And sometimes it's a lonely space to be in. And so sometimes we need to share these spaces. So you guys have any questions for Kehau or for myself? You guys just shy. Okay, so what we don't want to do is force you into a situation. Yeah, if you're not ready for dance the verse, yeah, please get off the stage.
Somebody just dropped a question in
Okay.
the chat.
Sure. And what is that? You know, I should be wearing glasses, but then I try to act
I
like
think I can find it, Tangaro.
Kathleen asked,
And I don't need
how does
glasses.
influencer designs.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So, okay, let me close that. So hula informs all of my designs, and you know, once in a while, I'll create a piece that is not of La'au Hawaii or an elemental form that is sort of that is not Hawaiian. It always is. Hula, chants, stories, my own personal experiences, places. My artwork connects me to places. But when it comes to hula specifically, the kino lau that are very important, and it's an essential part of my hula life and journey. One of the things that happened in the more recent years here on Kauai is in May 2018, Rod appeared here on Kauai, Rapid Ohi Adep. And from as early as 2015 and 2016, I began to have that discussion with native plant people and people at the National Tropical Botanical Gardens and people that work in the invasive species committee about what are we going to do when and if Rod appears on Kauai. So we started to have that conversation, and I started to have that conversation in Halau as well. And then lo and behold, it was discovered on Kauai in May of 2018. We have both of the rod diseases here on Kauai. So I share that because I also recognize the kuleana to engage, take care of, understand, be well aware of the health of our forests. And so I have not picked a pualehua or likolehua from the forest for all these years since Rod arrived on Kauai. My closest experience with ohi'alehua is I will see it in the forest or I will see it in a garden. But the closest I get to it is with my artwork. And I'm able to love it, reflect upon it, put my pule down to manifest for healing, etc. So I just started this particular piece right here. You may or may not be able to see the gold lines. This is hand painted with a non-toxic water-based resist. And then once that is done, then I go back with, can you pass me my thing of paint brushes? Then I go back with a paintbrush and I begin to hand paint in all the different colors. I use all sorts of different brushes. These brushes are just for silk. I also paint acrylic. And I teach classes, you know, just fun kind of culture canvas kind of painting classes. But my favorite brush, and I tend to use the same one over and over and over again. Here's one of my favorite brushes. You see how beat up it is? All the side is all peeling, but this is how small it is. This one, there's another one in here. Yeah, like this. These are my two favorite brushes that I hand paint all of the, you know, the designs with dyes. And hey, can you pass me one of the cups of dyes? And I mix my own dyes. I take different primary colors and I just count the drops. There's formulas and stuff, and then I just put them in these little containers and mix it. So this right here is like a deep poppy red for the lehua, which is mixed with cyan and magenta. And then I have other colors too. This one here is just a, you know, this is a yellow. I haven't even used this yet. I've used this to mix other colors to get other reds that are going to go down.
Yeah, we have an interesting question here. It says, are you going to, or did you continue the Hiapo tradition in your own ohana for the generations that follow you?
Well, if I had one, yeah. So that is always a big concern for me. Where does the tradition go after me? Yeah, I don't have the answer for that today. I try.
Yeah. You know, the interesting thing with being a kumuhula is sometimes the kumuhula is the surrogate.
Right.
You know, where, you know, sometimes you have the biological domestic rearing, you know, you have the generation, you know, one generation taking and hanaing, but oftentimes in hula, and we can, by extension, in academia, because what we're trying to do is, at least what I'm trying to do is, I value the hula processes so much that I've tested it in academia and it works. In fact, I wouldn't be here talking with you if I didn't have proof that the systems that is used in the halau to hanai strangers, give them opportunities to either come closer to you or stay with you just a little while, and they got to move on because the match is not, you know. And some of them that will stay with you, we call them lifelong learners.
Right.
You know, I have 5 children, but I have a whole lot more children when I count the people that I uniki.
That's right.
Because, and interestingly, sometimes, I can guarantee my kids are not on this forum, but sometimes you're teaching somebody else's kids. Sometimes you're, oh my Lord. And so, so sometimes we do hanai. The relationship between grandparent and grandchild is now transferred to systems like halau hula, halau va'a.
Yes.
The people that are farming and fishing, they don't just teach stranger kids the secrets. They actually have to go through a hanai process where, you know, you got to work with the person. They got to trust you this information. And the longer you stay, the more you get. The more you get, the more you got to give. So you
Yes.
see, it's not, this system of hanai is no longer just biological. In fact, it has always also been sociological, because in the old days, the kumuhulas were not too different from now, where they have to entrust sacred knowledge
That's
to
right.
relatives. They got to hanai that relative, that person, they test that first. You know, it's like when you go to the river, yeah? We don't just jump in. You got to throw things in there. Or you throw maybe your Lolo cousin, tell them, try jump. You got to test the water before you
Right.
go in. So that's a really good question, because
That is a good question.
sometimes our students in the university, they come from Hamajang families, Hamajang community, and it's real. Some of them
Yeah.
come out of jail just to come to school, and they got to go back to jail when they pass school.
Wow.
For academia, for halaus, how many individuals have halau been the pu'uhonu, the safe place?
Yeah.
Community is just kind of dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Not all
And you
communities.
know, yeah. And over the years, and you know this well too, especially in the college system, that people come and people go, and you might have a few that will stay, and if they leave, they eventually come back. But you know, and that was hard for me at first, and then I realized that time is timeless. Whatever time that people are here, and I can inspire or transfer or share, guide, whatever it is, with hula as a catalyst, then, and this is the mature Kēhaulani saying that's okay.
Yeah.
That's my ka'i. I wasn't always able to say that. So I look at time differently. And but hula teaches me to embrace that in a whole different way. So, you know, Carla dropped in the chat asking, was silk always my first choice of fabric? And do you embrace the patience that the dye teaches you as you begin, since it can move and flow without the boundaries? Absolutely. I think that what I was intrigued about where the silk was concerned was the way that it feels. And the silk, here's a piece right here. The silk is lovely when the colors go on it, but after it gets steamed, so when it's all pow, I'm done painting it, I laid the silk down between press paper and contract paper, like in layers, and then I roll it up tightly like a Tootsie Roll. And then I tape it all up, and then it goes into a steamer. So my steamer's in the corner over there. I used to do it. I used to do it like homegrown style. I'd build my own because I couldn't afford it. And eventually I just saved my money and I invested in a commercial steamer. So this one, I don't need to like use propane or anything like that. I just plug it in. It's an electric steamer. The column of rolled up silks that are laying flat goes into the steamer, and I steam it for several hours. For me, I like to steam my silk depending on how many I have in there. Sometimes I can steam anywhere between 12 to 15 pieces at a time, which makes a big roll like this. And so if there's more silks, I leave it in the steamer longer. So it could be anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. And then when it's done, and I'm a nervous wreck until every piece is rolled out, because you don't know, you know, if water drips on it, it's going to have a permanent water stain on it. Or sometimes the colors might, anything can go wrong, and there's no guarantee. But when I unroll the paper and I take out the silk, it's mesmerizing. Like I do the happy dance, I cheer, sometimes I cry because I worked hours on a piece. So, and that's when the vibrant colors come out. So I don't know if you can see this. I'll hold it up a little better. This is llama. And this is like all kinds of colors. I just kind of went on a heyday with this. And so there's fuchsia and green and purple and oranges and yellow and different kinds of greens and pinks. And, you know, I don't, for some of you that might not be familiar with the llama plant, the liko, the liko or the leaf buds of the llama is so beautiful. It is a beautiful fuchsia pink. And so when I see these plants in the wild, in the forest, and they're at a certain stage, I am so inspired. So this is a silk charmeuse that is llama. And, you know, and I have others. This is a habotai silk. This is not dyed. So I wanted to show you the difference. This is a fabric paint and it's beautiful. You know, it kind of has like a metallic sheen to it. Same thing, you know, I draw the base design freehand onto the silk with a resist. Then I go back with a paintbrush. Everything I do is one stroke at a time. Even the background colors, yeah, there. When you work with silk, well, the way that I work with it, I don't like ho'olu'u it. Yeah, I don't dunk it in a dye bath. Everything is all hand painted, and this is one of my favorite ones here. And it's kind of whimsical. This one is on, what is this? This is like a silk crepe de chine. And this is the pe'ahi, or the Lawaʻi o Makana, which is the true endemic Lawaʻi, not the Lawaʻi that we are most ma'an familiar with. That's a naturalized Lawaʻi. But this is the Lawaʻi that is famous in Kauai chants and songs and stories. So this one here, and I name all of my pieces. This one, it doesn't have like a really, you know, a hohonu name. It's simply titled Pe'ahi and Pinau. So I love the Pinau. I love dragonflies.
Kēhau,
Yes.
I wanna leave with that thought in mind, that the Pinau.
Yes.
Idea, because they're born from water and then they fly in, you know, and then they fly in. So Pinau is used worldwide as a sacred image, and it's about the image of transformation. And so interesting, I don't know what got you guys to come today, but you know, this series is called Mōkaulele. Mokau is a dialect, our Hilo dialect. It means a flying hook, and it comes from the story of Maui. But we named this Mōkaulele because, like a good fisher person, we gotta throw maunu out in the water. We gotta chum the water so the fish come. And guess what? You the fish, and you invite. This is hula, major hula, yeah. It's like
Totally.
when Pele sent Hi'iaka on a journey, Hi'iaka really didn't understand exactly why she was on that journey. She just was doing what she was told to do. She had no clue that it was, she thought it was to get lohi'au, but it was really to resurrect her deity through the getting of lohi'au. So you're here today because I don't know why you got into a hook. You bit the hook. So the chum was good, the maunu was good. But why did we have you bite the hook? It's because we wanted to give you an opportunity to really, through the story of one person, to reflect on your own. Too often in this world and in worlds past, we subscribe to the beautiful stories of other people and totally neglect our own stories. We put our own stories on the back shelf of the library. In fact, sometimes we don't even value our own stories. And but you know, this Mōkaulele is about bringing your stories forward. We use actually the stories to professionally develop our faculty, staff, and administrators here in the university system, they want to know the 10 commandments of student success. We say, tell me your story first, because student success is found in your story. If I know your story, I can help you make alignments. We're so ready to subscribe to somebody else's methods, but Mōkaulele is about listening to one person's story and going, oh my goodness, my story is not too different and it's just as valuable. Am I using my stories to help me make good decisions? Am I happy with who I am today? Or do I need to mature into another me? And sometimes that's scary, to mature into another you. Because, you know, when the great thing is we don't have to give up anything. We have, you know, in our old system, which is still modern for many of us, we have 40,000 gods. We don't have to choose one above the other. You can have them all, whether it's one. For some people, one God is good. For some people, 2, 3. It doesn't matter. So, you know, this Mōkaulele is really about student success, but it's not necessarily about the tuition-bearing students. It's about the student character that will always be a teacher and will always be a student. So, in closing, I want to say mahalo to Kehau and to the grandfather who would close up the garage and turn them into a halal with rooms. We don't know if it was permitted by the county, but that's all right. The rooms serve the community. All those plumerias that were planted, that the memory followed this young woman into Kamehameha, an island away, to go through her whole schooling. Mahalo to that teacher, that dorm person who decided to keep you in, made reason to keep you in instead of making reason to take you out. At the end of the day, that's what it is. Okay.
Right.
Mahalo to, you know, all the silk, because it's interesting. If you don't know where silk come from, yes, you should find out, because it's coming out the back end of this worm.
That's right.
Even the kukai can teach you something.
That's right.
There's a lot of value even in that part of our biology. Kehau, my huge aloha for saying yes, coming on board, and I honor you and your story. I've always had these silks and I wear them when occasion calls. They're special, but they're special not because they're just nice. They have a story.
Yeah.
And to me, that's what even makes it even more valuable. Now I'm not gonna even let somebody use them because, you know, I don't know if they can bring them back.
Yeah.
But, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say mahalo. This conversation need not end. You can contact Kēhaulani through her website.
Yep.
What is it?
It's Lavenahawaiʻi.life. Life.
.life. If you
and
have,
I'm actually Lavena. That's my first name, Lavena. And that's another story.
I will say that
you can learn about it on the website. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah, Lavena. We all have those names. Yeah, sometimes. Whew. But in any case, want to say thank you to the tech support, Noel and Noel.
Thank you, Noel.
You know, from Hawaii Community College, to Gelma Kuakane London, our huge supporter and actually the creator of this platform. She's at the University of Hawaii at Hilo. And, you know, if you would like to explore the role of ka'au, the transformative process for the development of your community, of yourself, of, you know, your family. But if you're a teacher in academia, let us know. We have a lot of resources that we can share. We've developed this framework for umpteen years. We thought we were just learning hula. We didn't know that those hulas one day would become the scaffolding for us to teach life and how to live. We thought we were just learning poo-poo, hinu. Whoa, I can create leadership principles based on that one song. So
that's right. Little did we know. But we didn't have a choice.
Sing your songs. If you're from Hawaii, sing them. If you're not from Hawaii, find out what your indigenous songs are. Sing them because there's magic in them. Cook your old foods, you know, your traditional foods. Remember the stories of your grandparents or the person down the road. If you had horrible grandparents, because sometimes we do, there had to have been somebody that was great in the neighborhood, or else you wouldn't be here today.
That's right.
Okay, so aloha nui ya kako apaulo. Yeah. Okay, stay warm, stay dry. Okay, and Kehau ahui ho. Thank you again for everything. Look, she and freeze. Lee, who it means to be extremely cold, so she had freeze again. Oh, she came alive. Okay. Ahui ho no kako.
Mahalo nui. Thank you so much. Ahui ho.
Kehau, if you can stay on board for a little
No,
while.
I am. I'm just saying bye to people that have to leave.
Ahui ho no kako. Pi'ilani Smith, sister. You see Pi'ilani?
Oh my gosh.
I know. I was like,
Hi.
oh my gosh. Aloha.
Oh my goodness. Who else is there? Okay, hola. Oh, I should have looked at the gallery earlier and I didn't. Hi, sis. Oh my God, so many wonderful friends. Thank you so much. Some of my homana are here. I so appreciate.
You. Yeah, let's get to see the other side. Okay, so we're going to say goodbye to Melia and Svetlana, Kathleen, aloha. Yvonne, thank you for joining, but we're going to say goodbye at this time. We're going to have a little meeting. Ahui ho no kako. Okay, is that
Thank you, Noel,
Thank you.
for saving us. Oh my God, I haven't ever had so many frozen moments. I'm just glad that you're there, because if it was just me running this, I'd be in a panic. Because I don't know what to do.
It's the role of the sidekick.
That's right. That's right. Gotta have that sidekick, brother.
I love sidekicks, and yeah, so Kehau, thank you again for sharing your story. And that's what, just to give you an idea, we need to have people remember their stories so that they don't have to rely on living somebody else's story. Mōkaulele is just, I hit my friends first,
Honestly, Tangaro, honestly, that's why I had to email you, because I was like, this must be a mistake. I think he might have hooked up the wrong Kehau. So I had to ask you, are you sure that you were invited?